right now, I would like to turn our service over to someone else. I know you didn't see this coming today. Actually, nobody saw this coming today. I want to turn the service over to somebody else right now, and it's my honor to introduce to you a person who rarely sees things my way. He thinks he's always right, and nobody's going to tell him otherwise. I never spend a lot of time with this person, and I really don't support his interests a lot, nor do I seek to let anybody know that we're really associated with each other. So I want to introduce him to you right now. I want to turn the service over to Jesus Christ. So, in my defense, the only part of that introduction that was true was the part that I want to turn this over to Jesus Christ. The rest of that stuff doesn't apply. I do share his interests, and I do want people to know I'm associated with him. But that was a terrible introduction, don't you think? Would everybody agree that was a terrible introduction? I'm off to a roaring start. Yeah, that was awful. Good job up there. Yeah, that was a terrible introduction. But were you surprised to hear Jesus introduced like that? Of all the ways that we can introduce Jesus, that appears to be a terrible introduction. The problem is how often he's actually introduced like that. He's introduced like that a lot. So hang on to that illustration. I'm going to come back to this in a little bit, but we're going to park that illustration right there for a little bit. And that's a terrible way to start a sermon, but I'm going to start a sermon like that anyway. I'm done with that. I'm just going to set that to the side, and we're going to go into the rest of this. But that introduction, hang on to that, because I'm coming back to that later. Last Sunday, we took communion together, and we discussed what the disciples would have been thinking in that upper room. As they were sitting in that upper room taking communion, we thought about what they would have been thinking about, what they would have been experiencing that day. And everything pointed back to the Passover event that took place in Egyptian captivity that night. Everything pointed back to that. The night of the 10th plague brought freedom to the people who were oppressed in Egypt for over 400 years. That's what that Passover was. That's what it all pointed to. Their entire lives were influenced by Egyptian culture and pagan worship. This is what every one of those people grew up with, and we've got to think about that. For 400 years, you don't have anybody living at that time who was alive when they went into Egyptian captivity. Those people are all gone. So the people that were brought out of Egypt were people who grew up in Egyptian culture and pagan worship. But now they're free from all of that. They get to move from that. When Israel left Egypt, God began to train them for something better than the things that they were accustomed to. I'm going to take you from Egypt, and I'm going to train you to be something more than you ever were before. What you were slaves. That's what you were. You were slaves. But I'm going to train you. I want to teach you to be something more than that. But this was going to take a lot of instruction and a lot of commitment on the part of the Israelites. This is to get this mindset that we're not slaves anymore. We're no longer slaves in Egypt. Now we're free. And God says, I want to teach you how to be who you are, not what you were. I don't want you to keep this lifestyle that you're accustomed to. You're free from that. Yeah, but I can imagine how they probably felt the first time that they wanted to do something. You know, we need to ask somebody if we can do this. You're free. That feeling when you're free, when you're used to captivity, would be a lot to get used to. Like, can we really do this stuff without getting in any trouble? Yes, you can, because this is who you are now. You're free. So you have to move from the lifestyle you're used to the person that you are now. These people were used to seeing pagan rituals. The Egyptian nation was a nation who worshiped thousands of false deities. They worshiped the sun, they worshiped the rivers, they worshiped everything. They had a god for anything you could think of. They had a god that controls this, that, and the other thing. Thousands of deities they worshiped. Their rituals were satanic and they were very twisted. They were deep into this culture. The Israelites were surrounded by that type of lifestyle. That's what they saw day in and day out. They saw that form of worship. They saw these cultures, or this culture. They saw this way of life, and that's what they grew up with. So God's teaching them, this is not right, even though this is what you're used to. And I want to show you what right looks like. I want to take you from that and bring you into a life that's pleasing to God, not one that is trying to appease the gods. I don't want you to live like this anymore. I want you to live free. God was bringing the nation of Israel out from this environment, this culture, into a life and a relationship with Him. That was the whole goal. Look at Leviticus 11, verse 45. It says, "For I am the Lord who brings you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, for I am holy." It was time for Israel to understand who they were and how they should behave. I want you to understand who you are now. Old habits, old rituals, old behavior had to be left behind. This was the whole purpose of this long conversation between Israel and God. You've got to leave all that old way of living behind. You've got to walk away from that. We got to go into something new. Because you are new, because you are free, because you are God's people, and you have to understand what that means. Today I want to focus on a few verses which confuse a lot of people. This is where we get into all those long chapters of the laws that God gave to the Jewish people. You know the fun of the book of Leviticus? You know, the riveting plot twists and all that don't happen in the book of Leviticus. Anybody ever read the book of Leviticus? Okay, we've got a few of you. Anybody ever wanted to sit down and read that one more time through as soon as you were done? Okay, all right, yeah, that's how riveting it is. It is one of those books where you're like, oh my goodness, can I even get to the end of this book? It just seems long and dry and boring. And a lot of people get caught up in this because it's just that chapter after chapter after chapter of laws that were given to the children of Israel. Many of those laws pointed to customary behavior. Don't act like this anymore. A lot of those laws were for that purpose. Many of them were designed to show separation and freedom. They were illustrations reminding them that you are now set apart. That's what the laws were given for. And many, of course, are moral laws which apply still to today. Thou shalt not kill. Good law. Still intact. We still apply those moral laws to our lives even today. I want to show you a few of these laws that a lot of people struggle to understand, and I want to show you why they were given. These are some fun ones. And not a lot of sermons preached on these specific laws, but when I read these ones, my 5-year-old theology kicks in. Why? But it really makes a lot of sense when you understand why they were given. So many people find these portions of Scripture boring because they don't understand the purpose of these laws. At first glance, these rules seem to be a little bit weird, but they do have significance. But we're going to look at a few of them. So let's have a little bit of fun in the book of Leviticus, if you ever thought you could do that. Let's have a little bit of fun in the book of Leviticus. First of all, I need to find out if my verse is right here. Yeah, we're going to go to the book of Leviticus, but I want to show you some laws that were given in Deuteronomy, same kind of laws. I just noticed that I put a verse in here that wasn't in Leviticus, even though I told you we were going there. But this is the same nature of the law. So look at Deuteronomy 22 in verse 9. It says, "You shall not sow your vineyard with different kinds of seed, lest the yield of the seed which you have sown and the fruit of your vineyard be defiled." Let's have some more fun here. "You shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together. You shall not wear a garment of different sorts, such as wool and linen mixed together." These are actually laws in the Bible. Fun ones, right? Okay, so our ox and our donkey can't plow together? No, it's a law. Oh, okay. And I can't wear linen and wool together? Yes, it's a law. It's a law. These are actually laws God gave to Israel, establishing the fact that they are separate. They are now separate people. To us, these laws seem bizarre. How did these make it into the books? How did that? Seed sowing, animals plowing together, and wardrobe practices. These are the laws. These were the ones that God wanted to emphasize. It seems a little different. It seems odd to us, right? Like, okay, don't mix your fabrics. Is that a big deal? It's a law. Okay, all right, we're not going to mix the fabrics. I have a donkey and an ox. Don't let them plow together. Okay, is that a big? It's a law. Okay, it's a law. God gave these laws to Israel. These were just a few of the laws that illustrated how Israel was supposed to be different. These were visual reminders, always in the mind of the Israelites. The fabrics were plant and animal. There's cotton and wool. You've got two different fabrics here. They shrink and they behave differently. And when blended, they conflict with each other. You make a garment out of wool and cotton, and then wash it, and then dry it. And you don't even have to button it wrong. It'll still look that way. Because the fabrics shrink, they behave differently. God says, don't wear the garment that's made from wool and cotton, linen and cotton. Don't do that. A blending of seeds would end up ruining the fruitfulness of the vineyard because those seeds don't complement each other. They go against each other. Donkeys and oxen pull at a different rate. Even their stride and their strength is different. That poor donkey, you hook them up to that same yoke. You have an oxen here and you've got your donkey here and you say, go. Before long, that poor donkey is just going to be, legs are just hanging there and that ox is just going to pull them around. You know, they pull with different strength. They pull with different stride. God says, don't blend these things together. These things were not made to work with each other. One will hinder the other one. One will hinder the other one. Blending them would weaken what each one of them were able to do on their own. Don't blend those two things. These laws illustrated what God wanted his people to remember. Israel was not supposed to blend their new culture with the cultures of the surrounding nations. I want you to leave the old, and I want you to adapt the new. I want you to walk away. Don't blend what you grew up with and all these cultures that are around you. Don't blend these with the good. Don't blend the two. God repeatedly warned them that the other nations would weaken them as a people wholly devoted to God. Don't blend these things. And God gives them laws that they can use as visual aids from day to day. Don't blend. Don't blend these things. Then God gave them a few other interesting laws. These ones have been taken out of context to use to shame people even today. We've seen these laws before. We've heard people use these laws. But let's look at Leviticus. Let's look at Leviticus 19 and look at a few of these. Leviticus 19 verse 26. You shall not eat anything with the blood, nor shall you practice divination or soothsaying. You shall not shave around the sides of your head, nor shall you disfigure the edges of your beard. You shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor tattoo any marks on you. I am the Lord. Here we have the ever popular no tattoos verse. No tattoos. We've heard it. We have that mindset, at least in this country, that tattoos are a sign of rebellion and a sign of sin and a sign of waywardness from God. This is the verse that is used a lot of times for no tattoos. The problem with teaching that this verse is preaching against tattoos is the fact that it has to be taken out of context to do that. You have to use this verse out of context in order to preach that God doesn't like your tattoo. That's not the application. That's not the context. And people have to stop using this verse for that purpose because that's not what it's talking about at all. Every verse in the Bible has to be taught within the context of that verse. That's fair and that's right. So let's look at this one within the context of this verse. Remember, God is teaching the Israelites how to be his people. That's the whole goal. You've left Egypt. Now I want you to be my people, separated from what you were used to. The pagan worship, we're going to push that behind and we're going to move forward with true worship, where I'm trying to train you to be who you are, not what you were. So that's still the context of what's going on here in Leviticus. The entire existence of the Israelites have been influenced by Egyptian paganism. These people, that's all these people know. This is what they grew up with. This is what they're used to. These verses are referring to just that. That's what we're talking about here. This is not a verse condemning people with tattoos. That's not what's going on here. The Egyptians would cut their bodies. If you notice the picture on the bottom there, is that these people would actually cut their bodies, and they would tattoo themselves for the dead, just as the verse indicates. They would make these marks. They would scar. They even cut pictures into their skin so it would scar with that picture. So that would be a tattoo, but it would the scar would form into the image that they cut into their skin. They did it for the dead. This was part of their pagan worship. That's what they're doing here. They would involve themselves in satanic divination. They would be, this was their culture. This was the environment that the Israelites walked away from when God delivered them through the Passover. He wants them to understand that these were forms of cultic worship. This isn't how worship should be done. That was the old. Now I want you to see what you're supposed to be, who you are, not what you were. The practices of the Egyptian culture were all the Israelites knew. They never experienced life outside of pagan influence. They never saw that. God wanted them to see that. What Israel needed to understand was they are now free. This is the difference. What are you used to? We're used to all of this. Well, now it's going to be different. What's the difference? Now you're free. Now you're free. You're my people. You have a relationship with me. God was about to use the Israelite nation as evidence to the world that there is only one God. And he is the one true God. He wants to use them as an example. He wants them to reach the rest of the world. But in order for the world to see God, they had to see him working in and through his people. That's how they were going to meet God, in and through his people. So they had to be different. But God didn't just give them a bunch of weird sounding laws. He didn't just give them a bunch of weird ones. He told them to stand out in other ways also. And these ones we can see, this is amazing. It's still in Leviticus 19. Let's look at a few of the other laws. Leviticus 19 and verse 15 says, "You shall do no injustice in judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty. In righteousness you shall judge your neighbor. You shall not go about as the talebearer among your people, nor shall you take a stand against the life of your neighbor. I am the Lord. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely rebuke your neighbor and not bear sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord." These laws share the same page with the fabric and livestock laws. In your Bible, if you look, it's the same page. You've got these laws here. You shall not take vengeance or bear any grudge. Can we use that today? Yeah, these laws still work for us today too. It's same page. The context is the same. God wanted their behavior to be drastically different from the behavior they experienced while in captivity. I want you to be different. I want you to be different. Don't hate people even in your heart. Don't bear any grudge. How we doing there? You want to take a survey? Okay, we won't. We won't take a survey. But how are we doing there? No grudges. Yeah, but don't bear, and it's neat that he put this way. Don't bear any grudge. What about a little one? No. Don't bear any grudges. Same laws. Same list of laws here. This is how God wanted to be represented. I want you to represent me. I want you to be something that reflects who I am. This is who you are now. You're not slaves. You're free. He wanted his people to reflect his character. This is how the other nations would come to know him. How are they going to meet me? How are they going to know me? Because you're set apart. You're different. That's how they're going to see me. God set these people apart for a purpose. The nations of the world were supposed to be introduced to God by the testimony of Israel. When the Ark of the Covenant was brought in to Israel, David gave these instructions to all of Israel. The ark represented the presence of God. So because of that presence right there, David made this declaration. Look at 1 Chronicles 16 and verse 8. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the peoples. All the nations of the world were supposed to be blessed through the testimony of God's people. It was a promise even to Abraham. The nations of the world will be blessed through you. That means everything you are points to everything he is, and one day, one of his descendants were going to come, and it's Jesus Christ, and it's going to touch the whole world. You are an example. He started his own group of people, the Israelites, to be an example to the rest of the world. The actions of his people were supposed to point to the character of God. God brought them out to shine a light to the rest of the world. I need you to be different. The laws that God gave to Israel were shouting out, you don't have to live that way anymore. You're free. Be different. Be different. Shine, be a light to the rest of the world. Be different. Don't mix your old ways with your new identity. And he gave them so many laws as visual aids to them. Okay, don't mix these two things. Why? Because they don't work well together. You need to let the old ways go, and you need to be who you are. Just like the fabrics and the seed and the livestock, they don't work right when they're mixed. Don't mix these things. Don't mix the old ways with your new identity. You are now free. They were no longer among a people who served gods who they believed needed to be appeased. They don't live with those people. They don't live in that culture, that environment anymore. We're not trying to appease God. We're trying to do something with God. We have a relationship with God, and we need to make sure we're set apart so people can see that we are different. Their God was a righteous and holy God. He wanted their lifestyles to reflect that. He wanted Israel as a nation to be a light to the world. This was not just a command for individuals, though. These people were supposed to be a showcase for God's grace and goodness. That's what he wanted Israel to be. You're the showcase. For what? For my character. So the whole world can get to know me. You're on display. You're the showcase for my grace and my goodness. Now, be a light to the world. Be a light to the world. This is also what he called us to be. This is where it gets personal. And this is where everybody's like, well, I've been here long enough. It's got to go. We got to go now. No, stay, because this one's about you. This is where it gets real personal for us. Look at what he says in the New Testament about us. 1 Peter 2:9. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, who once were not a people, but are now the people of God, who had obtained mercy, or who had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. God is asking us to showcase his love to the rest of the world. You are a chosen people. I made a people, and you are in that group. You are my people. Now let's let the world see my love. You are a showcase to the rest of the world. That means we have to do things different. We have to be different. Stop handling life with that old programming. Yeah, but when people do me wrong, I remember how I used to handle it. Walk away. That's how you used to handle it. What am I supposed to do now? Forgive them as Christ forgave you. Well, that's a lot of forgiveness. That would be hard to do. Then let him do it with and through you. Let him do it. Let him shine his light through your life. Forgive them. Offer grace. Yeah, but that's hard to do. It's hard for you to do, but it's not hard for you to do with him. Amen. Do it with him. You are his people. You are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood. Shine the light. You are the showcase for God's love to be displayed to the world. That is who we are. We live among other people, but we are supposed to be a light to those other people. The people, we've heard a lot of times, we live in the world, but not among the world or of the world and all that. You've heard these things. We do live in the world, and we do live among these people. We can't mix things that shouldn't be mixed. We have to keep that picture that God gave to Israel. We need to apply that to our own life. Let's not mix things that shouldn't be mixed. We can't worship the way the world worships by placing other things above God. God must be evident in our life. Don't mix the things. Even though we're surrounded by people every day, we are to live a life that points to freedom, not enslavement. We have to point that way. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 14. Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? And what communion has light with darkness? Come out from among them and be separate, says the Lord. The command not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers is the same picture as the ox and the donkey pulling the plow together. It's the same picture. In the New Testament, we have these same pictures, even though they're not laws that were given like they were given to Israel. We have the same pictures in the New Testament. It's that same picture here. It doesn't mean that we can't be friends. It means that we're accomplishing different goals. Can I be a friend of somebody that's not saved? Absolutely, and you should. You absolutely should. But you've got to remember you're accomplishing a different goal than they're accomplishing. So if they're doing something that is in opposition to God, you can't pull with them because you're accomplishing something that is complementing God. Don't put these two things together. Can you love them? Can you be a friend? Yes, you can be and you should be. But remember, you don't mix the ox and the donkey. You don't mix the cotton and the wool. These things don't work well when they're put together. Yes, we are supposed to be in the world, and we are supposed to be reaching out and loving these people, but don't be unequally yoked. The ox and the donkey that were yoked together accomplish different goals. They have different strengths. They don't work well together. So God says, don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers. Doesn't mean that you can't be friends. It doesn't mean that you can't love them. You absolutely should, and shame on you if you're not. We should love them, but don't mix the two. Don't be unequally yoked. What fellowship does light have with darkness? They don't, because they don't work together. When one shows up, the other one has to leave. They are constantly separated. That's what God's saying. Love them, be their friend, be with them. Show them God's love and God's grace, but don't be unequally yoked. Remember, you're doing something different than they're doing. To walk in fellowship or in agreement with unbelievers blends two different opposing things. That's what it's blending. And that doesn't work. Light and darkness oppose each other. We're called to be a light to the nations. Our lives should advertise Christ in all that we do. In all that we do. We were once people who lived in darkness. We found fulfillment in sin and self-gratification. That's how we used to do it. Just think back. That's how we used to do it. Yes, we enjoyed the sin. We found to find pleasure for ourselves. That's how we did things. That's how we operated at all times. But God saved us, and He delivered us from a life of slavery to sin. So you got pulled out from the bondage. You got pulled out from captivity. You got pulled out from slavery. So how should you live now? In freedom. In freedom and in a relationship with God. Look at Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 8. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the world. Walk as children of light. The world is full of people who judge. The world is full of people who refuse to offer forgiveness, and they hold grudges. We're surrounded by people like that all the time. Just think of life. We know that's true. We're surrounded by that all the time. The world is full of people who are just trying to get ahead. And I get that. The family of God is full of people who are already ahead. That's the difference. Because of what Christ has done for us, we're already ahead. We're not trying to get ahead. God launched us way up there when we got saved. We have nothing to prove. We just have something to show. It's God's love in us and through us to the rest of the world. Be a light to the world. We know the answer because we have the light. We are no longer slaves to sin. We're free in Christ. We are God's people. You are a chosen generation. You are God's people. Come out from among them and be separate. Shine. Shine. Let them see Christ in you. Be different. God was talking to a group of people that came out of Egyptian bondage. They came out, they understood what they came from, but they didn't understand what God was trying to do with them and what their purpose was. So God says, I want you to be different. I want you to shine my light to the rest of the world. The nations around you need to see that there's a difference. He was taking a group of people out of Egypt and he was establishing a nation that lived differently. Do it differently. The world needs to see that there's a difference in you. It was his love for the whole world that prompted him to form a nation that would reflect him. Because I love all of them, I'm going to create you. I'm going to make my own people. Why? Because I love all the people and I need you to show them who I am. I need you to be different so they can see God working through you. And they can be attracted to me because of the way you live. That same love has asked us to do the same thing. We are supposed to do the same thing. The reason God gave Israel all those laws is because he knew they weren't just going to change overnight. People are kind of funny like that. We don't just change overnight. These people needed help. They needed guidance. They needed to go from the old mindset and strive to live as people who are free now. And God understands this about us also. So check this out in Romans 12. You've heard this verse before, I'm sure. Romans 12, verse 2. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Once you have freedom in Christ, you need to learn to live in that freedom. It takes a renewing of the mind. The old programming's still here. Somebody did me wrong. What you gonna do now? I'm going to lean on the new programming. What's that? Christ in me. That's the new way. But the old way, don't blend. Don't blend the old way with the new identity. You are free. Don't act like you're not free. You've got to separate those two things. Renew your mind. Strive to reflect Christ in everything that you do. Everything that you do. Our old behaviors were associated with our captivity to sin. That's why we did things the way we did things, is because we were tied to captivity. Now that we're no longer bound to sin, we should not behave like we are bound to sin. I still handle things in sinful ways. Why? You're not bound to that anymore. Why do you act like you're still in bondage to sin? It's just the way I've always done it. Don't mix the old ways with the new identity. Separate these two things. Don't mix the cotton with the wool. Don't let the oxen and the donkey pull together. It doesn't work. What do I do now? Understand that you're free and live free. Let Christ live through you. Let him, consult with him before you decide how you're going to act. Work with Christ in everything that you do. Jesus illustrated this with a parable of the wine in new wineskins in the New Testament. And I like this illustration here. Look at Luke chapter 5 and verse 37. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, for else the new wine will burst the wineskins and be spilled, and the wineskins will be ruined. The fermenting action of the new wine would put pressure on the skins, on these wineskins, which they were no longer flexible enough to handle. And the skins would end up tearing and bursting, and then all that wine would be wasted. Jesus says nobody does that. Why? Because it puts pressure and strain where it can't handle it. And now you don't have a wineskin and you don't have wine. You've ruined both. Why? Because you put the new with the old. You blended the two together. Nobody does that because you understand the process. One weakens the other. They weaken each other and neither one of them can accomplish anything. Don't blend the two things together. Mixing the old with the new always ruins the potential of the new. It always destroys it. The whole point of giving laws to Israel was to point them to Christ. I want you to understand who I am, what you're reflecting. I want everything to point to me. It revealed their need for him, and it showed them how to reflect him. That's what all these laws were for. God wanted to emphasize that they were free. They could now live in that freedom. And they can be a light to the rest of the world. Leave the old habits behind. Stop doing the old, blending it with the new. God loved the other nations, and he wanted them to see a people who walked in a relationship with him. That's what all these laws, these weird laws mean. I want them to see me in you. Rahab the harlot was rescued because God was evident among his people. We go back to the story of Jericho. Why did Rahab want to be one of them? Is because she saw the evidence of their God. I want to be like you because I see him in everything that you do. I want to be with you, and I want to be one of your people because I see God working through you. Ruth followed after God because of Israel's light. I will not leave. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Yeah, but you're a Moabite woman. You have no connection. Then let's make a connection. Let's make a connection. The only thing that can make that connection is our God. Your God will be my God. Your people will be my people. I'm coming with you. Why did Ruth choose to do that? Because she saw the evidence of God through his people. The wise men at Christmas followed a star because of Israel's influence among a pagan nation. It connected people. God's people make a difference when God is seen in their lives. It makes all the difference in the world. When people see Christ in you, they're compelled to that love. They're compelled to the character of God because something's different about you, and it happens to be him. And they're compelled to that. When you got saved, you were set free. Look at Romans chapter 6 and verse 6. Knowing this, that our old man was crucified with him, that the body of sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves of sin. God wants you to know the same thing he wanted the Israelites to know when he brought them out of Egypt. You are no longer slaves. You are a chosen people. You are the light in a dark world, and people need to know that I love them. I love them. And they're only going to know that because of the way you show my character through your life. Come out from among them and be separate. Be separate. Be different. Live in a way that points to Christ, and don't mix the old ways with your new identity. Why? Because you are the world's introduction to God. Let's go back to the beginning of the sermon. Remember that terrible illustration I gave? That terrible introduction to Jesus Christ at the beginning of the sermon? The reason I did that is because of this point right here. You are the world's introduction to God. The person sitting right where you're sitting right now, you're the introduction. You are the world's introduction to God. What kind of introduction are you making? When people see you, do they see God in you? Are you representing him the way he wants to be represented? Have you come out from among them and are now separate? Or are you still mixing the old ways with your new identity? You're the introduction. You're the introduction to your children. They need to see God in you. You're the world's introduction to God. What kind of introduction are you making? This is where it gets real personal. I don't like this sermon anymore. I don't like it at all. This is where it gets personal. It got personal for me too. By the way, this is, every once in a while this happens to me, but while I'm writing the sermon out, I wrote these words and then I stopped typing because I was upset. When I typed, you are the world's introduction to God, I don't like that at all. Even though I'm the one that typed it, I read it over, I'm like, yeah, I don't care for that idea at all, because that reflects on me. What kind of introduction am I making to the world? What kind of introduction am I making? And I had to think about that, and it hit me personally too. If I am the world's introduction to God, what kind of introduction did I just make? Did I make it like I did at the beginning of the sermon? Because that was an awful introduction. What kind of introduction are you making to the world? Do our lives reflect a people who are separate from the things that oppose godliness? Is that the introduction we're making? Or do we represent that mixing the old with the new is acceptable? Because it's not acceptable. We must understand the importance of who we are in Christ. We are his introduction to a lost and dying world. Do we understand the magnitude of that statement right there? You are the introduction. You are the light to the world. Let them meet me. Let them meet me. You make the introduction. That kind of hits home. At least for me, it hit home. Yeah, am I representing him the way I'm supposed to represent him? You know that third commandment? Not to take God's name in vain? That doesn't mean to speak it in vain. That means not to bear it in vain. When somebody takes on your last name, they are bearing your name. They are representing the family name. God says, don't bear my name in vain. Don't take my name in vain. Don't represent me in a way that doesn't represent me. Don't mix the old with the new. Don't blend the cotton with the wool. Don't let the donkey and the oxen plow together. Don't throw two different kinds of seed into the vineyard together because they will complicate things for each other. Let the old go away and let the new live. Let your new identity be what it is. Let the light of God shine through your life. Don't blend the two. Don't take my name in vain. Represent me in a way that truly represents me, not in a way that shows the world that it's okay to blend the old with the new. It is our job to make sure that we are a light to the rest of the world. Be a light to the rest of the world. And when they hear you say, may I introduce you, make sure the person you're introducing them to is truly how you are reflecting him. Make sure they see him in you. When you say, you've got to meet my God, they should say, I already want to. Because I see the light in your life. I want to know your God. May your God be my God, and may your people be my people, because I see the light that's in your life. You don't blend the old with the new. You really do let him live through you. We are a chosen generation. We are his special people. Represent him in the way that he wants to be represented. Introduce him to the world, because you are the world's introduction to God.